happy to entertain a verbal question. If I think it does have bias, I will reinterpret it for the candidates to answer. Also, when you ask a question, if you would make it clear whether you want all the candidates to answer it or if it's directed toward one or more specific individuals, that would be great. Mr. Harper.
One of the festering problems that we've all been thinking about is our contract with Manchester as it's ongoing. And there's been talk of high school. There have been a lot of underlying problems with our children going to the Manchester schools. As we approach the end of the contract, how would you as a board member set up an evaluation of what we're getting out of Manchester? Would you hire somebody? Would you do it with your school administration? How would you, if you're going to come to the town and ask for our own high school, which some people may, how would you answer the question is, have we gotten a good education out of Manchester? Mrs. McHugh used to sit in a lot of their meetings, and I noticed, I think, that's not being done anymore. Okay? So as a board member, as we approach the end of this contract, how would you go about grading the education we're getting out of Manchester?
All right,
is that all right?
Yep, and I'd like each candidate to answer that in 1 minute, please. Mr. Bowe.
First of all, I neglected to mention earlier, I'm in favor of forming a committee now to study why our children are wanting to leave Manchester. So I think that committee could start recording data now on a continuous basis so that we have a record not only in the years prior, but from now on. Unfortunately, I don't see a high school in the near future because the state has removed its 1/3 funding. It puts us in a terrible position looking at a $55 million high school, as we're told. I don't think that the tax rate can support that. To our benefit, enrollments in New Hampshire have been dropping for the last 10 years. This provides an opportunity for a school that does not have a high school. Soon, towns will be wanting our students. This could provide us an opportunity to have some type of a multifaceted contract with multiple communities, or as we do now, with a primary contract with a clause allowing us to have tuition agreements with other towns. As far as the evaluation, though, I think it would have to be that committee, and it would have to evolve from there. Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
I wouldn't want to hire someone or some consultant not from around here to study it. I think setting up a committee, especially with our school administrators here in Hooksett, and looking at it ahead of time looks good. Now it would be a while before we can get out of the contract, or we could build a high school. I don't think that that's economically feasible. You know, I hope, but I don't think it will be economically feasible to get a high school of our own. But we could study that. I think that Manchester, you have to look at what they're doing and are they following what they said they would do. A lot of times you get lip service, oh yeah, this is good and this is good, but you know, class sizes are down this year, or one board member said before, we're getting results because we told them sternly, you know, that we want some results, we want you to do this and that, and yet they're not really getting results. So, you know, the class sizes are higher than they were, and there's a lot of other problems too.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
I think, so your question was evaluate the education, not the social aspects of the high school. I think that we have 3 schools here in town that are full of people that are capable of doing that evaluation. You know, the teachers that are in there every day understand how that process works. Whatever, I think we can gather their information, you know, have them interview the students that are graduating, or interview the students that are going, find out what their concerns are. Look at some of the test scores, obviously keeping the pertinent information that can identify each individual student, keep that private, but take a look at that data and use the resources we have here in town. If we can't do the job with the resources we have in town, we have a very good baseline of what to ask next if we hire a consultant from outside this area to make that evaluation. Once we make that evaluation of whether or not we're getting a quality education from Manchester, we can make the educated decision whether or not we want to build a high school here. And I think Mr. Stop there. The cost may not
You
be,
can finish your sentence.
the cost may not be $55 million. I think Bo did it at a little less cost. However, the funding being gone, it becomes difficult for the voters.
Ms. Regan.
I would agree with Mr. Pearl and Mr. Dubus that I think that we've got enough talent in Hooksett to put together a committee that could really examine the situation and see where we're at and what our children are getting. My own personal view is that I don't see us having high school anytime soon. I think that right now with the economy, with the population of the city, the town, with everything else that comes along with it, I'm not sure that it's in the cards for us to have our own school in the near future or by the time the contract is up in Manchester. I think we need to pool those resources and look at what Mr. Pearl mentioned and some alternate plans. We have a main contract with a school system. Maybe it is Manchester. Who knows who it might be. But we look at some alternate contracts as well. The enrollment is down across the state in a lot of schools. There are some great schools out there, be it Bow, be it Pinkerton, be it Pembroke. To have a subcontract with some of those, I think is really important to examine and look at.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan.
Hooksett's actually been looking at high schools going back, I'm sorry, 1963 town report, which talked about changing Old Memorial into a high school, which was actually smaller than what Memorial is now. So the desire of individuals and parents and students to have their own high school has always, own high school in Hooksett, let me say. West and Central, I believe, are our high schools. What we need to do is, whether it was I suggested or someone, members of who are in the audience now who are school board members, question, well, let us ask the seniors who are graduating, what could Hooksett do better to prepare them? What were the pros and cons of the education that you received at Central? We have a study committee that is now in phase 4, a new study committee. We've had study committees for the last 4 years. We had forums, 4 forums that gauge what's going on. We've done a survey which gauges that. So we are trying to gauge that information.
Thank you. Another question from the audience? Yes.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Sandra Mack, and I just have a question about, I think Ms. Regan may have addressed part of it, but to all the members, recently Auburn, who's part of our SAU, is pulling out of the contract for Manchester because I guess at certain points you can opt out before the end of the contract. I'm just wondering, as a board member, what each of you would consider or think about Hooksett opting out of Manchester at whatever next point that might be, and looking at Pinkerton as a potential high school for the Hooksett students, similar to what Auburn did.
Okay, I'm going to give each candidate 30 seconds to respond to that. Okay. Mr. Pearl.
Auburn, logistically, Auburn is much closer to Pinkerton, so I think that made sense for them. If there is a school that can accommodate the bulk of our students, I would certainly think that we should look at it, and we need to pre-plan before that opt-out period happens.
Thank you. Mr. Dubus.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think you had to do it, we had to do it over a year ago for that to happen right now, and now it's going to be years before we can. But I think whether it's Pinkerton or somewhere else, I think it definitely has to be looked at as a possibility to send our students to the best place that we can and do what's best for our students. Definitely.
Mr. Damon?
If I'm not mistaken, I think one of the warrant articles was set up so that we can set a commission to study that particular issue to find out what we can do to back out of the contract at the next particular interval. So I think that once we get that set up and reviewed, we can make a decision whether or not we can and where we're going to go after that. There may not be room at the schools that are nearby.
It's my understanding that the opt-out should have happened last year, and that at this point we are tied into this contract for the long haul here. And that's why my suggestion would be is that we look for subcontracts with other schools that might be able to help us with some special needs and opportunities for our children. when we renegotiate the contract. I believe there are a lot of things in that Manchester contract that need to be renegotiated, such as a voice on the school board for Manchester. So I just believe that right now we've got to deal with what we have on the table, unfortunately.
Mr. Sullivan?
Hooksett could opt out right now of the contract. The contract specifically states 2 years prior to each 5th anniversary. 2011 was the contract that we needed to let them know before the 13th. We have a study committee that's looking at if there's a will, having this committee, there'll be a way. So once there's a will, by doing all this preparation, we'll have a way to go and look at a different high school option.
Thank you. Someone else with a question? Yes.
Yes. Since there's been so much discussion about the high school contract, my question is, if you were told as school board members from the school district's attorney that the contract that's in place is ironclad with regard to the fact of all the students from Hooksett have to go to Manchester, what would you do as a school board member for the students that are here presently and the students that are going to go to the school of record, which is the Manchester schools? What would you do as school board members?
I just want to be clear. Are you asking about the exception on a case-by-case basis?
No, I'm not asking. I'm asking if the attorney said to them, because if they got a clarification from the attorney that said all the students, as it was stated, have to go to the school of record, which is the Manchester School District, what would they do as school board members for the students that are in the Hooksett schools that will become high school students and for the students that are coming up? What would you do as school board members?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with Mr. Sullivan. 30 seconds, please.
We would make sure that we hold their hands to the wheel, that they live up to their contract. If there's issues that are concerned, that we make sure we increase the communications beyond what we're doing, apply pressure and making sure that Hooksett's voice is heard. The letters that we sent out in the past have resulted in positive results, and we need to continue to apply the grease. The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Ms. Regan?
I would think that first and foremost, like yourself, Ms. McHugh, I understand that you attended a lot of those Manchester School Board meetings. It's going to be important to really look at the contract, really look at the deficiencies in the school system now, and really get on their case, put them on notice, and let them know that, okay, you're saying all of our children have to come here, then you've got to live up to this contract. And there are things that they are majorly still deficient in. I know recently I was at a school board meeting and they had a representative from Manchester saying that none of the cafeterias at Central pass the food service. You're serving your child food that didn't even pass the health code. I would definitely put them on record and go through the whole contract, make them fix those issues.
Mr. David?
I think that if the contract is ironclad, we need to define the places where we have leverage, not to expose this town to a burdensome lawsuit from Manchester that would just decimate our tax rate. So we need to find out the places we have leverage, use those points, and the approval that is a case-by-case basis, have that defined, understand exactly what a hardship is. Make that information available to our students that are enrolled in 8th grade and lower. When they're ready, they have that information ready to go. They know how to present their case so that the school board can look at the hardship, it would be the only ironclad way out at this point. And we would be able to present to Manchester, say this person has a legal standing as a hardship, they can go somewhere else.
Thank you. Mr. Dubus?
Well, I think you have to go by the contract. If that's what the contract said, then that's what you do. And there are other ways that certain hardships or things that can happen with the New Hampshire administrative rules. But the contract doesn't say that. The contract in the same paragraph says that you can go to a school not of record. And so if an attorney said that reading the current contract, then I'd probably